Okay, continuing here in the week 6 material, we're talking right now about campaigns and elections. If you go to slide number 10, okay. So the 1860 election was an important election because it led to, the rise of the Republican Party nationally, because of course, Abraham Lincoln as a Republican won. What was interesting about that election is the Democratic Party's northern faction nominated Stephen A. Douglas, and he thought that slavery should be voted up or down in the territories. But then the Democratic Party's southern faction, so they were divided, okay? They nominated John C. Breckinridge, and he wanted to legalize slavery in all the states. And what ended up happening, in this election, again, it's like the Democrats had two candidates running against one Republican candidate. So the Democrat vote split sharply, allowing Republican Abraham Lincoln to win, but he only won 40% of the popular vote, okay? Hardly a mandate, but then again, the country was fracturing and splintering and ended up dividing in half with the northern states and the Southern Confederacy, okay? And so, obviously with the Civil War breaking out, it was the first and only time in the United States history that the party system failed to peacefully settle America's political differences. One of the unique characteristics of America is that despite all the wrangling and fighting and feuding, and so to speak, in an election, a national election like the one now, the beauty of our system is once it's done, there's a winner, there's a loser, and it's peaceful. Okay, I'm not saying you have to like perhaps the candidate that won, but the point is in our system, the beauty of it is, there's not a coup. Okay, you go to some of these what they call banana republics in Central America and South America. After an election, people just start shooting each other, and there's some sort of civil war, going on. Okay, did that happen in the United States in 1860? Yeah, it did. But it's an exception rather than a rule. That's the beauty of a free country. Okay, and so. So then going on to slide number 11, okay, what happened is basically after the Civil War, it's pretty much been Republicans and Democrats to the present day, okay? And it reflected, kind of a realignment of power within that particular, party, okay? And so let's talk about realignment a little bit. Are we seeing a bit of a realignment right now in the United States as I record this? In the middle of June of 2020, we're seeing the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement in response to the police, brutality and the killing of George Floyd. And there is talk that perhaps within the Democratic Party, there's going to be a split, and that literally the Black Lives Matter movement might become a political party. Now, it hasn't yet, but there's been talk of it. This would be a classic example of what we call a realignment, where suddenly some, huge issue arises that causes a particular party to split, and a group of people who see that perhaps that party is not representing them, or because of the emotional strength of an issue, in the case of Black Lives Matter, it causes a significant contingent within a party to break free and create a new party, okay? The story is, the ending's yet to be told. We don't know, but that's an example. That's what a realignment looks like. We're actually living through potentially one. We'll see what happens, okay? So part of a realignment involves 4 basic elements: the disruption of the existing political order because of the emergence of an unusually powerful and divisive issue. Black Lives Matter, does that count? Yeah, it would, okay? In the case of the 1850s, slavery, yeah, it would count. An election contest in which the voters shift their support strongly towards one party, okay? Again, a formal realignment would not occur unless perhaps Black Lives Matter would create as a separate party and actually have candidates, and then suddenly they would win. A major change in policy brought about by the newly dominant party, and then an enduring change in the party coalition, which works to the lasting advantage of the newly dominated party. Okay, those are examples of realignments, okay? So they talk about, on slide number 13, three alignments since the 1950s, okay? You had the Civil War realignment, of course. The Republicans, the Union Party, replaced the Democrats as the nation's majority party and dominated the more populous North. In fact, they dominated the presidency and the Congress for the next 30 years, okay? The Democrats dominated the solid South. You had the 1896 election, another alignment occurred, okay, a realignment. The economic panic following a bank collapse led to a depression, so the Democratic Cleveland was blamed for it, allowing the Republican Party to make additional gains in the Northeast and the Midwest, solidifying their position as the main party for the U.S. for the next 4 decades, up until FDR in the 1930s and the Great Depression. Okay, so then if you go to the next slide there, that would be what? Slide number 14. There's another great realignment, okay? Again, the Great Depression, something dramatic happened, okay? The perception was the Republican Herbert Hoover, who did try to pump money from the government into the system following the stock market crash, but it didn't work because he didn't go at it as strongly as perhaps FDR wanted to. But again, the perception was Republicans allowed the free market just to kind of have its, run its course. The argument was that wasn't enough. There needed to be a lot more government intervention in the economy. And again, that's what FDR ran on that idea. And so the balance of power shifted from the Republicans back over to the Democrats, okay? And so you see there on the slide, the New Deal greatly expanded the role of the federal government in areas such as business regulation and social welfare. So, 36 years of Democratic policies were interrupted only by President Eisenhower's presidency. The reason realignments have such a substantial effect on elections because it affects the voter party's identification, and young voters tend to embrace the newly ascendant party, so it gives it a solid base of support for years to come. Okay, I mean, that's a big part of it, okay? So today's party alignment and origins, slide number 15. A party realignment gradually loses strength as the issues that gave rise to it decline in importance. Their most dramatic change has been in the South. The civil rights movement alienated Southern white Democrats, who then now tend to vote Republican. Northeastern states, which used to be Republican, now have slowly become Democratic, caused in part by declining influence of moderate Republicans and the ascendancy of Southern Republicans, who tend to be more conservative on social issues than those living in the Northeast. Again, these are some of the realignments that have happened, okay? And so if you go to slide number 16, again, you can kind of see some of these swings going on within the parties, okay? In the 1970s, there was a swing to the Democrats after the Watergate controversy, which is, the Republican president committed a lot of those crimes. In the 2000 election, there was a swing to Republicans after President Clinton's presidency. I just forgot there. And then in 2008, there was a swing to the Democrats after Bush's presidency. In 2010, there was more of a swing to the Republicans following the first 2 years of Obama's presidency, when he really tried to run roughshod over the American people by trying to get a lot of his progressive agenda through. There was a lot of pushback, and there was a lot of Republican gains in the House after that. Okay, 2020, it'll be real interesting to see what happens this year. I don't make any predictions, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens. You got COVID-19, you got all this racial unrest, you've got a lot of people that are very frustrated right now with just the general tone of electoral politics in America. So it'll just be really interesting to see what happens. With this election, we'll see. We will see. I don't know. Okay. Okay, if you go to slide number 19, talking about electoral and party systems. Okay, again, throughout most of our history, we've had a two-party system: Federalists versus Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans, Whigs versus Democrats, Republicans versus Democrats. Okay, most democracies, again, you see this a lot in Europe in the parliamentary system, they have a multi-party system in which 3 or more parties have the capacity of gaining control of the government separately or in coalition. Okay, Why are there 3 or more parties in most democracies, but only 2 major parties in the U.S.? Because again, in the U.S. system, there's winner take all. Okay, whereas in a lot of these European democracies, it is proportional. Okay, you get seats in a house or something based on the proportion of votes that your party gets, and so they kind of divide it up that way. Okay, it's a little different. And so if you go to slide number 18, a big part of the two-party system is largely results of the nation's choosing its officials through what they call plurality voting in single-member districts. Okay, so each constituency, each district, and think of a house district within a state, they elect a single member to a particular office, such as a senator or a state representative. And so the candidate with the most votes, that plurality in that district, wins the office. So it's not like we got 2 or 3 reps within a district, okay, which you might see something like that in a European system, in a multi-party system. And so this discourages minor parties from getting involved because they, unless you're Democrat or Republican, you're most likely not going to win. So case in point, if a minor party receives exactly 20% of the vote in each of the nation's 435 congressional districts, it would not win 1 seat in Congress, okay? Again, whereas in Europe, there's what is called proportional representation, okay? Skipping over to, actually I'm going to stop there and I'll begin with slide number 20 because slide number 19 is kind of a reiteration of that. So I'll begin with slide 20 next.